What is up, guys? It is the sports nerd Bradley Walker, and welcome to the Walker Report, part of NGSC Sports, guys. Remember the website, it's ngscsports.com for all your current sports content. We are also part of Mancini Media, the Game Winner Sports Network, Snowman Multimedia Sports, and the Game Sports Alliance of America Incorporated. Welcome in, guys. Happy Thursday. This is the first Thursday of the month of September. Yours truly has a birthday in 25 days. We have a special guest this evening, Larry Schechter, and I apologize if I pronounced his last name incorrectly. He is the author of The History of Fantasy Sports and the Stories of the People Who Made It Happen. We will be talking to him, and he's already actually in the back room of the podcast as we speak. Before we get into that, I want to thank our sponsors. The first one is TradingZenSpaces.com. It is the local choice in St. Petersburg, Florida for house cleaning, organization, decluttering, and pet sitting. It's about finding the peace within you, adding comfort to your life. And guys, remember, Zen Spaces begins with you. Be kind to yourself and one another. We are also sponsored by Fun-Wags.com. Born from a near tragedy, a Fun Wags mascot had a bad reaction from a store brand treat. We make treats with 3 ingredients you can pronounce. Head on over to fun-wags.com to try these treats because at the end of the day, our fur babies deserve the best. All right, guys, welcome in. Let me bring Lou in here real quick. Lou, good evening.
Good evening, Riley.
And let me bring in our guest, Larry. Good evening.
Good evening. You've got my name right, Schechter.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I'm sitting here before the show. I'm like, oh my god, if I butcher this guy's last name, it's not going to be good.
Yeah. That would have been okay.
Well,
I've heard some good ones before.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I got in contact with Larry on LinkedIn, so he has a book, and let me. Me and Lou will ask you some questions. I want to ask. I have like 3 questions, but I'll kind of throw it all into one. I read online, Larry, that it took you 18 months to put the book together. Is that right? Is that what I read?
Yep. 18 months of pretty much full-time work, researching and interviewing dozens of people.
Okay. I guess my question would be, were there any like well-named players or coaches or sports personnel in any of the major sports and college, obviously, that inspired you to write the book, or was it just one of those things that fantasy sports is a big part of sports now, and that's what made you write the book?
Well, I've played fantasy sports since like 1990, for years, and for a long time, I just look at the industry, and I see we now have millions and millions of people playing all over the world, not just fantasy football, fantasy baseball. You got fantasy Iditarod, fantasy wakeboarding, it's like everything, and you got podcasts and Sirius XM radio channel, 24/7 fantasy channel. You got news services, stat services. I mean, it's an incredible, huge $25 billion industry. And so for several years, I just thought, like, how did this all happen? Where did this come from? And I thought somebody should write a book like this. So I did. How it happened.
Okay. And was there anybody, any coaches, players that you got a chance to interview about playing? Because I know in some cases, a lot of them play, behind the scenes. Like you said, it's $1 billion industry. So a lot of people play every year. And I know football's about to kick off, and I think they have a rain delay until 8:40, but they're about to kick it off. So, yeah.
Right. Well, I have some stories in the book about professional players that, play fantasy sports. As far as actually, did I actually talk to anyone personally? No, like Clay Walker was a professional football player, and I interviewed him because he was the head of the NFL Players Association for several years. So they were involved. They were involved in a lot of a lot of events. So I talked to him. But other than that, I got stories about, people I didn't talk to personally, but I got stories about like Cal Ripken Jr. playing Stratomatic baseball with the Orioles announcer John Miller on a flight from Baltimore to the West Coast. And Bobby Bonilla was the commissioner of the Orioles Fantasy Football League. And I got there's a one of the guys I interviewed. He ran one of the first statistic services for football, and so he'd have to monitor his website, like all the time games were going on to make sure it was operating properly. So one day he's watching a Major League Baseball game on TV, monitoring his website for football. It's like in September when football started, and he sees there's an all-star. I'm not going to name the guy because an all-star, a Major League Baseball all-star pitcher, is pitching this game, and in about the seventh inning or so, the manager comes and takes him out of the game. And what I forgot to mention is that this guy, James Sarah, the guy who owned the stat service, he knew that this Major League pitcher was in one of his football leagues, and he's watching this guy pitch. And the second the guy gets taken out of the game, goes into the locker room, within like minutes before he could even take a shower, he's making a move on his fantasy football team.
That's cool. That's cool.
So there's a lot of stories about professional athletes. So basically, the book is about the entire history. Like, it starts years ago with precursors of fantasy sports, like tabletop games. Then you get into APA baseball and football, Stratomatic. Those were precursors. Then it gets to how was fantasy baseball created? How was fantasy football created? The first commercial games, the newspaper games. There was a company in Canada in the 80s started running newspaper games. They had like 1 million people at a time playing games all over Canada and the US. And like hardly anybody's even heard of this company. Then you get into the first publications, magazines, books, and radio shows, TV shows, stat services, news services, websites, the entire history, then through the more modern things like, daily fantasy sports was a more modern, more recent invention. You have there's a chapter about the Fantasy Sports Trade Association, and there's a chapter about wide expansion. And people don't know, there are 200 million people in India playing fantasy cricket.
I didn't even know that you could play that. Wow, that's cool. That's cool.
Right.
Neither did I.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
Neither did I. Like, when I started researching the book, I didn't know any of this stuff. And the thing is, when I started, my idea was I'll write the history of fantasy sports. And as I got into it, I started researching and talking to people. I started finding out all these interesting things that people had done. And so I realized very early on, I could just write like the facts and figures, what happened, and it would tell the story, but it would also come off as like a very boring research paper. But I was learning these interesting things about people. So that's where I got the subtitle of the book. The book is called The History of Fantasy Sports. The subtitle is "And the Stories of the People Who Made It Happen." So by telling the stories of these people, it makes it a really interesting book. And I'm not saying that like to sound arrogant. I'm just saying, the feedback that people have given, the reviews are incredible. People say it's fascinating. The Midwest Book Review said fascinating from beginning to end. People are saying it's an easy read. Paul Charchian was the head of the Fantasy Sports Trading Association for 12 years, and he's been in the industry his whole life. And he said, he read it and he didn't know most of this stuff, the stories that I told.
Lou, Adam, do you guys have any questions for Larry?
Do you play fantasy sports, or is that how you got interested in? I'm sorry, I was late. Professional podcaster.
Yeah, I've played fantasy sports since about 1990. Fantasy baseball, fantasy football mostly, and I'm pretty well known like for baseball. I'm in the two major baseball experts leagues, Tout Wars and Labor. USA Today sponsored Labor, I wrote a book 10 years ago called Winning Fantasy Baseball, where I outline all my fantasy baseball strategy. So yeah, so that's my background.
I think I've heard of that.
Larry, do you have a favorite team in each sport, or you just like to play fantasy sports and it's just
my favorite team? My favorite team is whichever of my fantasy teams is doing the best.
Okay.
Good answer.
I like that answer.
At the beginning of the year, my favorite teams are all my fantasy teams. And as the season progresses, and some of them suck, and a couple of them are pretty good, the good ones are my favorites.
I like that answer.
I have been known to be a Red Sox fan. I have been known to be a Patriots fan. Yep.
I'm in that boat with you. I'm both a Red Sox and Patriots fan. So yep.
Where are you from? I forgot.
I'm actually from Florida, born and raised in St. Pete. Yeah, I have no ties to Massachusetts. I don't have any family up there. I became a Red Sox fan because before they started winning all their World Series, they were the underdog to the Yankees. Everybody was a Yankee fan, so you cheer for the underdog. And I've been a Pats fan since the Steve Grogan era when they got beat by the Bears at Super Bowl 20. So yeah, it's and then I know it's going to be painful this year to be a Patriots fan because I don't know how many games they're going to win this year. So
yeah,
exactly. No, I think it'd be more painful for the Bears, to be honest with you, because I don't see them improving all that much from their one measly to like their two measly games they won this last season. So I wouldn't think they're going to improve that much, even with their star quarterback.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, were you a sports fan growing up, and then got into fantasy sports, or did fantasy sports get you into sports?
No, I've always been a sports fan. I've always been a big sports fan. And yeah, when I first heard about fantasy, I immediately loved it. The way I heard about fantasy, in the beginning, when people start playing, it's completely different than it is now. We're talking about before the internet. In fact, fantasy football started in 1963.
Is it okay?
Yeah, in fact,
I knew it was.
When I talk about like the interesting stories about people involved, like for example, the guy who invented fantasy football primarily is a guy named Bill Winkenbach, who invented it in '63. And one of the people in that league, in the original league, was a guy named Andy Musolimus. Musolimus is the guy who actually is really responsible for starting to spread fantasy football, because the original league was kind of just like private. They didn't really tell people about it. But Musolimus, a couple of years later, bought a bar, and he decided to make the game available to the patrons in his bar, the regulars. So they started a league, and the next year, they had a second league and then a third league, and it grew and grew and grew. And people started, hear about it. This was in Oakland. People heard about it. It spread to San Francisco. Then next thing you know, people from bars all across the country are calling this guy, asking for the rules. So he really started spreading fantasy football. And when I was researching him, I read like article after article after article, and I'm reading the same stuff, over and over again for the 15th time. But every so often, I would pick up some little nugget that I hadn't heard before. And after like 15 or 20 articles, all of a sudden I see something I haven't seen before. Andy Musolimus was a freaking war hero. When he was 17 years old, Pearl Harbor happened, and he enlisted in a unit to go behind enemy lines where they said 97% of you are not going to return. And they gave him a cyanide pill, so if he was ever caught, he could kill himself. And then there's a guy, one of the stories in the book is about a guy was on his honeymoon in a hotel in the World Trade Center on 9/11. And his story of getting out of the hotel and surviving that is pretty incredible. And it's not in the book just like because it's some incredible story about 9/11. It's in the book because that experience was directly related to how this guy ended up getting into the fantasy industry. He's now a pretty well-known person in the fantasy industry. So it's like story after story after story. And then you got stuff like one of the very first statistic services. It's like people used to do statistics by hand. The commissioners of baseball or football leagues, they spend hours every week, getting the lineup changes, doing all the statistics, putting out reports. And when computers started to come around, some people, the early computer people were like, hey, I could do fantasy statistics by computer, make it really easy. So people started forming services. One of the first ones was a married couple, Jim and Gloria Berger. And what you did back then is the USA Today would come out on Tuesday with the American League statistics for the week, and then on Wednesday, the National League. So people doing statistics, they would wait for the Tuesday and Wednesday USA Today. And one Tuesday, actually it was a Wednesday, not that it really matters, but Gloria went into labor with her first child. Oh. And they didn't let that stop them from doing their statistics. So she would be she'd be reading statistics from the USA Today to Jim. He'd be entering it in a computer, and then she'd get a contraction. She's like, hold on, here comes another one. All right, it's gone. And so they got the reports out on time, and their daughter was born. And now, 37 years later, the daughter that was born that day now plays in a fantasy football league with her dad.
That's cool. I have a question. I've always thought that fantasy football, and if this is an unfair, and it's not a negative I don't mean it in a negative way, but I've always felt like fantasy football is football for sports nerds, or D&D for sports nerds, or Dungeons and Dragons. Is that a fair characterization of fantasy sports?
No, it's not. The thing is, years ago, that's what people thought. The very early days, hardly anybody had heard of fantasy sports, and it was assumed that it was like that. And in the very beginning, maybe there was a higher percentage of people you could classify that way. I don't know really, but that's really a perception that the industry had to overcome over time, of people thinking this is just some kind of game for like socially inept nerds playing it in their parents' basement. But it's not at all. It's like you have completely normal, random people playing fantasy sports. You got 50 million people in the U.S. play fantasy sports. You got at one thing about it that's amazing is it lets people bond together. Fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, husbands and wives play, co-workers play, and a lot of people bond over it. Like one of the guys that I interviewed for the book, his name is Mark Mariani. He was an executive with CBS Sports and Turner Sports. And when he first was invited to play in a fantasy football league, he didn't know about it, but he worked in Chicago, and when he was invited, he realized, if I join this league for fantasy football, I can call my boss's 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 boss in the fantasy office in Manhattan, and he's going to pick up the phone and talk to me about a trade or whatever I want to talk about. Whereas ordinarily, this guy in Manhattan wouldn't take this guy's call in a million years. And you got people at drafts. I've heard people say stuff like, I was at a football draft, and there's a guy sitting next to me who's a plumber, and there's a guy sitting next to him who's a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and the two of them are talking like they're best buddies. So in my book, besides just talking about the history and the stories of the people, I also am explaining how it's really a cultural phenomenon that has brought people together. And the main reason fantasy sports has grown so huge, worldwide $25 billion industry, is that it's great. Fantasy sports are great. People love it. The Harsh Jain, who's the founder of that big cricket company in India, what he said is, for him, fantasy sports is like having popcorn at a movie. It's like having popcorn makes the movie better, and playing fantasy sports makes the sports event better. A lot of people have read the book that don't even. Yeah, a lot of people who read the book don't even play fantasy sports, and they said they love the book because the stories are so interesting. It's not, it's about fantasy sports, but it's also really about business and entrepreneurs that created an industry.
Larry, I'm sorry, I'm a little late to the party. I'm Alex over in New York, and it's great timing. I mean, I'm a huge fan of fantasy sports, and it's interesting. Last week, Brad, who has a great podcast that we're on tonight, he had another guest, and we are talking about really, money making revenue streams. It's about passion first, right? The grandfather, their grandson. It brings people together. Fantasy. It also does inevitably make the NFL a lot of money. Is it nearly as big in your estimation in other sports like baseball or basketball? Because personally, I have football and baseball, basketball. I love fantasy sports.
Yeah. Well, fantasy football is definitely the biggest for sure. And what you just said, that's one of the things we said. The NFL and they make a lot of money off of fantasy football. Major League Baseball makes a lot of money off of fantasy baseball, and that's one of the things that occurred in the history of the whole fantasy sports is initially for a long time the NFL, MLB, the Players Association, they didn't like fantasy sports. They thought it was for geeks. They thought it would ruin the game. They thought it was gambling, and they're very resistant to it. But over time, they finally figured out that it's the people who play fantasy sports are watching 3 times as much more, NFL or NBA or whatever as the average fan. They're buying more merchandise. They're buying the TV packages. It's like they finally figured out they're making a lot of money off of it, and the fantasy is a good thing for them. But it took a long time for most of them to come around. The guy, Clay Walker, the guy I mentioned before, when he was the head of the NFLPA, he was ahead of his time compared to the other players associations and leagues. He realized early on fantasy was a good thing for the NFL and the players. So that evolved, and now, of course, they're completely, the pro sports are completely, into fantasy now.
Yeah, and from just one last thing to follow up on that, I mean, and Larry, you're the expert here. I'm just an amateur, but I'm an avid player. So I have a deep appreciation for fantasy. Since I was 15, I was into it, and I'm in my 40s. And every year it gets better and better because, Roto Baller, Roto World, you have all these awesome sites, awesome experts like you. Like you said, I think the biggest key why the NFL and the other pro sports really love it, now they're feeding money into it to make sure it keeps growing. It attracts the fringe fans, the granddaughters, the 13-year-olds, the 15-year-olds, the plumber who might have not been a football fan. Now he's watching, 4 games a week. He's getting the NFL channel. It's all coming together. So it's we never want to make it money first, but money is paramount to a lot of people, including Goodell. But it is smart, and it's attracting a lot of more fans into these pro sports, especially football.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you got like right now, the Chicago White Sox are like the most horrible team in baseball by far. And people could care less about the White Sox other than to see, like, are they going to set the record for losing the most games? But, it's like if the White Sox are playing some other crappy team tonight, like right now, the White Sox might be playing some, crappy team, and nobody really cares, and nobody's hardly going to watch the game except some diehard fan. But, if you got a couple of White Sox on your fantasy team, you're going to be watching that game, and and then the fantasy players are the ones who know who the backup catcher on the Pittsburgh Pirates is. It's like, so it was really interesting how the leagues and players associations were mostly completely resistant to it, and finally came around. That's definitely covered in the book.
I think what I'm hearing is that fantasy sports keeps the fans invested longer, which, like in any good business, the longer you have someone at your table, the more they spend on the experience.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Yes.
And so when you get fans to engage with the product, when it gets the fans actually engaged and invested in the product. When you can get them playing fantasy, when you get them playing the fantasy league, they feel like they have pseudo control over what's going on, and they can play GM for a weekend or a whole season. In my case, because I'm in a couple of fantasy leagues, and I thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you pick your own players, you manage them, you can cut people, trade people. Yeah, it makes you the GM. And there were, Dan Okren is the guy who is primarily credited with inventing fantasy baseball, and but there's a lot more to that story. Like I don't know if any of you have heard this, or I'm sure if you haven't heard it, I'm sure some people listening to this podcast have heard this idea that Dan Okren invented fantasy baseball on a flight from Connecticut to Texas, and that is not true. He did not magically create the game. There's a whole lot more to the story about how it was invented, but he is the man primarily credited with inventing it. And what he did is like in researching the book, I found out there were lots of people playing like really simple, primitive types of fantasy baseball going back years. But what Okren did when he came up with his game is he made it much more complex and involved. And, it's kind of like creating chess compared to checkers. And so he really made it like what Adam's talking about, where you're really like a virtual GM managing a team. Um, and I think I was going somewhere further with that, but the thought escaped me.
I know that feeling all too well.
It's like being it's like being a GM. Like and he really made it like people were playing checkers, and he came up with a version of it with those like chess.
That's it. And Larry, that was back in the day. I'm from Connecticut originally, but I remember driving to the Bronx with my dad way back in the day to go to Yankee Stadium to see Don Mattingly and Dave Winfield. And I'd literally beg my dad that, hey, if I'm the GM of the Royals, would I trade George Brett for Don Mattingly? It's always that. I think passionate fans, especially growing up, they love to kind of wear that GM hat and imagine themselves running a team. Lou, you can relate. You're in Jersey. Like, that's passionate,
Yes.
Baseball and football's the same way with me. But it's always had that kind of potential. And I remember like, back in the day, it was called rotisserie. And it was not as savvy and souped up and revved up with all the engines. Like right now, It's just everywhere. But it's always been an incredible idea. I'm really grateful that someone like you wrote a really good book about it. It's not just a hobby. I mean, people really enjoy fantasy. It's like you said, it's a way to be a GM, and I can own I don't know, but I can have a Pittsburgh Steeler. I could have Lamar Jackson playing tonight, and I could have AJ Brown tomorrow for the Eagles, and I'm watching every game. So it's a marketing boon. It's a money maker for the league.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and it was originally called rotisserie. Dan Okren, when Dan Okren came up with his version of the game, they met at a restaurant in Manhattan called La Rotisserie Française, and that's why they named it rotisserie baseball. And then what happened is they tried to make money off of it. They tried to copyright that. Well, they did copyright the name, trademark the name, but people very easily figured out there really wasn't any secret that they could really copyright or trademark. So people started just changing the name from rotisserie baseball to fantasy baseball, so they wouldn't have to pay that.
I remember was that. Yeah, I remember it was called rotisserie baseball, and then they would change to fantasy, and that's what. I mean, I didn't play it, but I sort of like took a slight interest to it. because I'm really bad at fantasy overall.
Yeah, the original football league in '63 was called GOPL. It was the Greater Oakland. Oh God, I don't remember. Something like the Greater Oakland Pigskin Prognosticators League or something like that.
Right.
It's called GOPL for short, GOPPLE. And it wasn't until a lot later that the word fantasy football kind of came into vogue.
Well, I
So,
can tell you how big fantasy baseball is. I
mhm.
got the opportunity, Larry, this year, and the season's not over yet, to cover the Tampa Bay Rays. And in the press box, they have a fantasy league just with the media. So they have fantasy sheets that they have just for every game. They'll take a sheet, fill it out, and then turn it in to the older gentleman named Duke who runs the press box there. But they turn all their sheets, and I don't play in a lot of fantasy sports myself, but it's kind of cool to watch them fill out their
Wow.
sheets before the game starts and stuff like that. And speaking of the Chicago White Sox, they play our Red Sox tomorrow, so that's who their next opponent is. I think they're 11 losses away from tying the record and 12 away from breaking it. So we'll see what happens with the White Sox at the end of the season.
I wish them good luck. Yeah, there were Dan Okrent's game started in 1980, and what happened is Okrent and the people in his original league, they were all like in the media. They were all writers and editors and whatnot. So they were in the media, and because of that, they wrote things, and the word got out about fantasy, rotisserie baseball. That's how people learned about it. And by I think it was like within a couple of years of their game, there was a rotisserie baseball league in almost every press box in Major League Baseball. So what you're talking about started way back at the beginning. And in I think it was '81. This is in the book. I don't have I don't remember every detail in the book, but I think it was the '81 baseball strike, where during the baseball strike, the baseball writers didn't have anything to write about. So some of them wrote about their rotisserie teams, and some others wrote about Stratomatic. And in Boston, speaking of Boston and the Red Sox, the Red Sox announcers there's Ken Coleman and John Miller at the time. During the strike, they broadcast Stratomatic games. The Red Sox were on a day when the Red Sox were supposed to be playing the Yankees, but they weren't playing the Yankees because of the strike. They broadcast a Stratomatic Red Sox Yankee game from it must have been WEEI studio, and they had like some Bruins players and other people came in, like celebrities, to manage the team, and they did a disclaimer at the beginning saying this is a Stratomatic game. But of course, not everybody tuned in from the beginning. So some people would tune in and listen to this, and they thought the game was really happening. They were calling play-by-play of a Stratomatic game as if it was a real game, and people would call in the station saying, like, the strike has ended. Like, I didn't know the strike ended. Like, I'm a Red Sox season ticket holder. I'm pissed off that they didn't inform me the strike is over. I could be at the game right now. And also then later in '81, the strike was continuing through the All-Star break. And the All-Star game was supposed to be in Cleveland. It was canceled because of the strike. But they put a Stratomatic game at home plate in Cleveland Stadium. And Rocco Scotti, is it Scotty or Scotto, sang the national anthem. And they played a Stratomatic game.
So cool.
They were lucky to get that season back.
Yeah.
And Moneyball and Bill James, all that stuff, it was so stat-driven. So it's kind of interesting. It was all born from that same passion for stats, right? A lot of the sports, the gurus, those are the guys in the dugouts of the tunnels. Brad, you're experiencing that now out in Tampa with the Rays. Like, once you're the belly of the beast, stats is a way of life. And before all fantasy, like you said, Larry, you nailed it. Guys were plotting like, wow, this is our passion. Let's turn it into a hobby. And fantasy was born in a great way, I think.
Yeah, when I first started to write the book, I know, at the time I knew some people consider Stratomatic and APA a precursor to fantasy sports. For me, I thought, they're different. I mean, the difference between them and what modern fantasy sports is that like games like App and Stratomatic they're based on professional athletes, but the prior year, whereas our fantasy sports are based on things that haven't happened yet. So when you draft your fantasy football team, and the season starts tonight, you don't know what's going to happen. When you draft a Stratomatic team, you know what this person's statistics were last year, and they're going to they should end up being pretty close in your Stratomatic league. But so when I started, I thought I'll probably write like 2 or 3 paragraphs about how like App and Stratomatic or some people consider them a precursor to fantasy sports. But once I started researching, I was like, holy crap, like there's so many interesting things about Stratomatic and Appa as well. But like there's so many threads of people that are in fantasy sports or professional athletes that started out playing Stratomatic or maybe Appa, and there are leagues that have existed for years. I mean, if people start playing like Appa Stratomatic 50 years ago in college and they're still playing. So I got like the first chapter is about like the precursors and stuff. So the first chapter's got a lot about Stratomatic and Appa, and then it kind of keeps showing up throughout the book too. Different things about Stratomatic or Appa. Keith Hernandez, one of the announcers for the Mets, he played Stratomatic. He played a lot of Stratomatic, and he uses it in his calling of Mets games because he said like he doesn't see the American League very often, and so he would look at Stratomatic cards to help him call American League games. He'd look at like the Stratomatic card, like what's this guy's, they have ratings for like arm strength or bunting ability or different things like that, and he would use those ratings to help familiarize himself for the American League players.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of, it's a long 2-part question, but so what makes someone a good fantasy player, and how much is it just being lucky, and what are your tips for new players and seasoned veterans to get better at setting up a fantasy roster?
Well, first of all, it is definitely skill. There's certainly luck involved, but there's also skill. There are people who consistently win, and there are people who consistently do bad. So there is skill. It's not just luck. And that question is actually been a key question in terms of the legality of fantasy sports. One of the big things in the history of fantasy sports is the question of, is it gambling? And you go back to the guy Andy Mussolinis that I mentioned, when he made the game available in his bar back in the 60s, they had a scoring system where it was based on cents. Like if you got a touchdown, you would get like 5 cents from the other people in your league, something to that effect. Or if you got if your guy ran for 100 yards, you get 10 cents or whatever it was. But what they did is, instead of it was really cents, but they called it points. And the reason they called it points is because they were afraid that one day the Vice Squad might show up and think they're gambling. So ever since the beginning, there's been this question, is it gambling? And that's something that's had to kind of be solved in the courts and in the legislature. Is it gambling or not? And there are certain points where this issue was being adjudicated, and if it had gone the wrong way, it would have really severely hampered the industry that we have today. But fortunately, it was deemed, most states have deemed it not gambling. It's a game of more skill than luck. So that's the main thing, is it's been proven to be more skill than luck, and that's why most states and the federal government have said it's legal.
Yes.
As far as the other part of your question, to be a good fantasy player, I think, to me, doing some work, just like preparing and studying it, learning. My book, Winning Fantasy Baseball, is all about my baseball strategy, like from beginning to end, how I do everything in baseball, and a lot of that applies to other sports as well.
All right, cool, very good.
All right.
It's interesting. Do you think that there's a correlation between when, and there's going to be plenty of fans and plenty of critics. There's always two sides to every story, right? So I might do both, I might not. I'm a big fantasy guy. I'll leave it at that. But when everything went legal, as far as where are you located, for example, Larry? I'm sorry.
Are you talking about daily fantasy sports?
Oh, and I'm talking about when FanDuel and Bodog and DraftKings and everything went legal, as far as betting $20 tonight if I take the Chiefs. When it became legal, I think there was also another. It further fueled fantasy because you can play on those sites on your cell phone or on a laptop and build fantasy teams daily now too, which is another huge wrinkle. I mean, I just fantasy is just thriving. It's so popular right now. Do you think there was an uptick with the legalization, for better or for worse, when pro sports gambling became legalized in many states, including New York?
Right. Well, the legislation that's what allowed FanDuel and DraftKings. That's what allowed daily fantasy sports to be born was legislation that said it was legal. As long as you have there's certain criteria that make it legal, and one of them is it has to be events for more than one game. That's why you don't have a daily fantasy game for just the Super Bowl because there's only one game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that the popularity of fantasy exploded because of that. Because one of the barriers for people playing fantasy is the time commitment. It's 18 weeks for football, 6 months for baseball, whatever. It's a long season. Not everybody wants to spend that much time. So daily, we made it easy for people to just play one day at a time if you want, or 1 week at a time for football. And you can join a league. Like if it's like tonight, the NFL's kicking off tonight. So if you didn't draft a fantasy football team by tonight, 3 weeks from now, if you want to play fantasy football, well, for a season long, it's too late. You got to wait till next year.
Yeah.
Daily, you could just pick it up. 3 weeks from now, you could start it. 5 weeks from now, whatever you want. So it especially appeals to younger people. There are a lot of younger people that were interested in fantasy, but they didn't want to make a commitment to the year long.
I think that's such a cool part, Larry. I mean, it's brought guys that I haven't talked to in years from high school, or just random guys that I've known from just any walk of life that have all stuck together like a band of brothers. Every year it's fantasy. Everyone, people have different lives. People, things happen for better, for worse, but everyone's like, oh, this is the time of the year to have our fantasy drafts. And now look at technology. It's amazing now. So now it's like you can do it with anywhere. You could draft with someone from Bermuda if you had to. So it's become so awesome, and now it's such a popular thing. Every year I have someone different. I have Jalen Hurts, and then I have Pacheco tonight at running back, and then tomorrow I'm watching Jalen Hurts. It's so cool. Like you said, Larry, you nailed it before me. You're running your own team, and it's like a stock ticker. Every day you log in, and your team's getting a little bit better, or it's moving down. If someone dropped a couple passes, it is so on point. It's like being a GM of your own team.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
Have you ever had someone in your fantasy team and you're like, wait, why do I have this guy on my team? He's terrible. I mean, did you ever regret putting one on your team?
Lou, when you draft, it's like a real war room, like the NFL or NBA or MLB draft. As Larry knows, if Larry takes Aaron Judge, the next pick, Aaron Judge is not available. It goes around the table, whoever's drafting, maybe Brad takes someone else, maybe, Tatis, and then you're building your team. If you neglect pitching, it catches up to you. There's a strategy to it.
Yeah, but it's I would never want to take Geno Smith on my team, or because he's always, horrible, and he was a Jet player, and now he's now he's doing fine. Or say, or of course, there are other ones like have been really like horrible. Like what you have anything because like if you have money, like okay, maybe this is not such a good idea because you would probably lose.
Lou, I give you enough flack because you never want to give the Mets credit when they win 20 in a row. You don't match. Imagine if you could take Lindor on the Mets shortstop or someone else. So you got to,
Yeah,
on the fantasy baseball team, I have a couple of Yankees. I'm a big Mets fan, Larry. But it just goes to show, it's like, are you going to be smart or bet with your heart? And it's fun. You build up a team of all different. It's like you're drafting any player in professional sports and starting from ground zero. And then you build
Yeah,
your roster, and all year you're watching every game, and your team is going up and down every minute.
yeah. There've been. I
It's
mean,
an
there's
amazing. It's
some
amazing.
people. Some people even have leagues where they combine sports. Like they have a league where you got, like, say, the NFL, MLB, NBA, maybe even the
yeah,
NHL. 3, 4 leagues in one competition. So, like, when it's your turn to draft, you might take a baseball player or a football player or a basketball player or a hockey player. It's like, I've
That's
never
too
done
much for
that.
me.
I've never done that, but there's some people who've had leagues like that.
Yeah. Wow, it's just a lot of fun. I've asked Brad
You know,
before. I think Lou, I've asked you. I mean, hey, I'm a fantasy nut. I love it. It really is, Larry. You nailed it eloquently and perfectly. It's like running your own team. It's like being back in middle school. When I was driving with my dad to the Bronx, saying, "Will you trade John Medley for that guy?" Like, you're running your own squad. It's a really cool thing, I think.
yeah, I mean, I've got
yeah,
stories in the book about people who, people like they're graduating college and somebody is thinking, I'd like to find a way for everybody to stay together because I know, when you graduate college, a lot of times people drift apart. And he started a baseball league, and that ended up keeping people together for 50 years. And there's 5 nuns in a convent in Chicago co-managed the fantasy football team.
Wow, that's awesome.
I was curious. You said, Larry, earlier that there's a fantasy cricket league. Cricket's a sport that can last for days. That's interesting. How a sport that can last a
Yeah.
long. I mean,
cricket.
cricket can last for months on end if the score keeps going up. I
Wow.
mean, it. Yeah, that's interesting how they would keep track of all that.
Yeah, I
How many
don't
times?
know the details of that. I don't know anything about cricket.
Yeah. I
That'd
think
be
it's
pretty
really
intense,
funny.
though, to be
I
to have to
should
follow
throw
the game for a month.
I should
Goes
just
longer
throw
than
in here.
Woodstock, and it kind of challenging.
I should just throw in here somewhere the book is available on most booksellers' websites, paperback and ebook. If you go to Amazon, look at the history of fantasy, Amazon, the history of fantasy sports, you'll see like lots of reviews and lots of details about the book.
Larry, I'm no one yet at least. But hey, man, I mean, I have passionate people that are in my Facebook feed. I'll share it on my feed for what it's worth because we love having you. What's the name of it? History of what is it
The,
again?
his, the history of fantasy sports and the
Awesome.
stories that people have made it happen. Yeah,
That's great, man.
I want to get the word out. I mean, everybody who's read the book pretty much loves it. Um, there people who anybody who likes fantasy sports will love the book. It's not because I did something not because I did something brilliant or came up with some brilliant idea. It's the stories of the people, that I learned.
Yeah,
You know,
it's got a great history.
And I think it's crazy that because I looked it up a few years ago, and what you're saying, I couldn't remember the exact year, but I knew that fantasy football had started back in the '60s, and it's wild to think that fantasy sports has been going on for 60 years now, and how fantasy sports has evolved right along with the sports in general.
Yeah, I always thought it started after the Super Bowl. I think it started before then.
Got to have a lot to do with technology there, though. You know what I mean? Back then, it was like notebooks in a press box somewhere at Wrigley Fields. Now it's like you can get anywhere, anytime on your cell phone, driving, walking the dog somewhere. It's become a lot more simplified with technology, right?
Yeah. I mean, it used to be, like I said, the commissioner would spend, hours every week computing the statistics, and then, hand them out to the people in the league. And when I first started in the early 90s, I'd have to wait for a report to be mailed to me. So the
Wow.
week would end on Sunday, and Wednesday or Thursday, my report would show up in the mail. And the people that ran the company then, like I started with a game called by CDM Fantasy Sports. They were one of the first pretty big companies, and they're included in my book. And when they started, the people that ran CDM, they both, it was a married couple. It was actually three people. Three people started the company. Two of them were a married couple that worked at McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis. And what they would do is on Monday, before they left for work, they would start the computer to run the report. And one of them would come home at lunch to make sure it was still running properly. And then when they came home after work, by maybe like 8 o'clock at night, the report would be done. And then they'd get them all in the mail. So the thing is, this computer report would run like the entire day from the time they left for work until about 8 o'clock at night. It'd be like 12 hours or something to run this report for 275 teams. Okay. Now compare that to today.
Oh.
That report would be run in a split second.
I wouldn't have to pay their electric bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried to get Brad. Brad was a hard no a couple weeks ago. Brad, I said, Brad, you want in? We got a spot. He goes, I'm good. I could still maybe look at Lou and talk to him. I haven't done it yet. Adam, you're completely approachable. Adam's a stats nut. He's already he's curious. He's sniffing around. I'll tell you guys, it is so much fun. And literally, if Lamar Jackson throws the TV tonight, if the owner of if someone who has Lamar Jackson tonight, if he throws a touchdown, you're looking at Yahoo or ESPN or whatever fantasy team you have, and your team raises up on the rankings. I mean, it's like Larry, you were saying you had to wait for a report every week. Now it's second by second. Yeah. If someone gets a first down, your team goes up. It's amazing. You're running a team.
Right. In the book, I mentioned when that first started, like the first incident where they did live scoring. I mean, it used to be, like I said, the mail, and then then the fax became an option. There's one of the companies, one of the first stat companies that was mailing reports. One day one of his customers calls and customer says, "Hey, could you send my report by fax?" And the guy says, "What's a fax? Never heard of it." And then it evolved to where you had stats by, you could get your stats online, and they would update every day. And then it became every couple of hours, every hour, and then it became live instant scoring.
Right.
Yeah.
The major reason why I said no is I just don't have the time to do it. That's why I say no to fantasy sports.
I hear you. No, I know.
If I was better,
Brad, we all love you, man. You got so much on your plate. I totally appreciate that. I was just hoping for a friend to join in. Adam, Lou, I'm still working on you. I'm not done yet.
Send me the
I'm
link.
up your trade. Adam, you would love this. We just grabbed. I should have already.
You gotta send me the link.
I know. I'll put the money where my mouth is. I'm sorry, bro.
I just never got a link. I can't do anything without a link. You gotta link me up, bro. Give me that link.
We missed the proverbial boat on football. How about maybe baseball? If a spot opens up, I'll get you in the league. You draft, like I said, man, you could draft any Ray or any Cobb or anyone, and you build a team. And every second you're tracking those stats, watching the game. Larry, it's become a phenomenon. I'm glad you're on, and I'm glad you wrote a book. You're one of the pioneers, as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to share the heck out of the book too.
Yeah,
I'll buy a copy.
One of the things was really cool is what the common thread really with all these entrepreneurs that I highlight in the book is they saw a need for something. Like, someone, early on is playing fantasy football. And they're like, wow, this is great. Fantasy football, this is great. But, where do I get information? There's no information available. So he's like, let's start a magazine,
Yeah.
And then somebody else, would say, well, there's only one magazine. Let's start another one. Or, I don't think it could be improved upon. So basically, you got all these entrepreneurs that see a need for something that doesn't exist, or maybe they think they can do it better or different. And what happened is, after I wrote the book, my editor went through it for the first time. My editor suggested I write an epilogue because I did not have an epilogue. And
Interesting.
just something, it doesn't have to be very long, kind of wrap it all up. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's a good suggestion. Let me do that. And I'm disappearing. Can you hear me up there?
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, so I started to think, okay, what am I going to write in this epilogue? And as I was thinking about it, it occurred to me, I just did with this book what all these entrepreneurs did. I saw a need for something that didn't exist, so I did it.
There you go.
That's pretty cool.
It's groundbreaking. It's cutting edge. I mean, you nailed it right there. There was always a passion. I'm a hole in the wall, but I can relate because the 8-year-old driving to Bronx to Yankee Stadium with my dad, I would make trade ideas up on the way to the game. There's always been a passion for people who want to, imagine running the team. So it's a great market, and I'm glad you're really hitting home runs in it.
Yep, thanks.
Do you think you're going to have a follow-up book or any other? Are you gonna spawn off or spin off into any other areas, or write another one to keep the fans going?
I doubt it. I mean, I seriously doubt it. And this book, it was like choosing an all-star team. There's never room for every worthy player. So I could have, it's like a 300-page book. But I could have written 500 pages. I could have written 1,000. But I have to keep it practical, obviously. But I don't. I mean, there's never been a book like this at all. And I don't think there'll ever be a book like this. There's no reason to write something that would be basically duplicating what I did.
Nice. Fair point.
Exactly. This is your first book, correct? Or no?
No, I wrote Winning Fantasy Baseball in 2014.
Oh.
Yeah.
A while ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago. So, I'm saying I doubt I'll ever write another book, but I don't know. Right now, I got one, 2014, now 2024. So, who knows? 10 years from now, maybe I'll come up with something.
10 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as I've been doing this.
We're going on, what, 5 years now?
I mean, Larry, an interesting, just an idea. You're a brilliant writer. You have ideas up your sleeve, but from my view, and I've done some writing. I covered like Friday Night Lights, Connecticut Post, wrote for a couple different, like much smaller, smaller local publications. So I'm a writer at heart. I love it. My family published a couple books, so I have a deep appreciation for someone like you. I was going to simply suggest maybe a follow-up, how to draft a winning team. Like, why don't you break it down further? You're the guru in that area. I think there's still stories to be told from your vantage point.
Yeah. Well, I'm just getting in right now to trying to get the word out about this book, which I'll be doing for a long time. So, we'll see. I certainly wouldn't be doing anything anytime soon.
Nice.
I think
share it up.
I think this book should sell 1 million copies. There's so many millions of people that play fantasy sports, and as I said before, even people who don't play fantasy sports have liked the book. So I just want to get the word out, have people understand. I know it's easy to say you got to read the book or it's a must read, but in this case, it really is. Go on Amazon, look at the reviews; they're all fantastic. So. But if you don't buy the book immediately, if you're busy, get the book, read it when you have time. If you don't get it right away, put it on your Christmas gift list or your birthday gift list.
Yeah.
It's on my Amazon wish list, just to let you know, Larry.
Yeah, you're right.
What?
It's on my Amazon wish list. So I'm gonna get it and read it.
Yeah. Yeah,
man. Hey, Brad, it might get you ready to say yes next time I ask about fantasy.
We'll see. We'll see.
Maybe someday, I suppose.
Guys, any other questions for Larry?
No, I'm good.
We're good.
Appreciate your time.
All right,
Yeah, Larry,
thanks for having me.
for coming on. But I mean, if you want to, I think you mentioned earlier that it's all on the major book sites and stuff. But if you want to go through that again, you're more than welcome to.
I'm sorry. Do what?
If you wanted to talk about where you could find the book and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. It's, Amazon. The easiest place to get is Amazon. The paperback and Kindle and all the details and reviews are on there. But if somebody really likes Barnes and Noble or some other place, most of the booksellers' websites have it. It's not in too many stores right now, but it's online, paperback and ebook at most places. But Amazon's probably the easiest, and Amazon's got the best price as far as I know. Also,
Larry, just for anyone I share with on my personal network, Larry, what's your last name? Sorry, Brad. Just if I share on my Facebook, what's your last name, Larry?
Schechter, Schechter.
Schechter.
See, Bradley was worried about.
Sorry to interrupt, Brad.
People misspell it all the time.
No,
it's all
Larry. I had a guest on a long time ago where I mispronounced her last name, and for 5 minutes he crucified me for not pronouncing his last name.
Well,
so I always want to make sure, and I'll apologize up front and say, hey, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. And that's why when I brought you on, I'm like, if I mispronounced his last name, he's going to tell me if I did. But luckily, I didn't mispronounce his last name.
I probably wouldn't have even mentioned it. If you mispronounced it, I probably wouldn't have even mentioned it. But
right.
Call me Larry. That's easy.
Okay.
Well, that always works.
I grew up in Schenectady, New York. So when I was learning to read and write, it's like Larry Schechter, Schech from Schenectady, SCHE, and that's kind of odd.
Schenectady.
Nice. Hey, Larry, I didn't ask you, man. Right down to the bare basics, bro. Who are your favorite teams? Any sport? Name a couple of your favorite squads.
I think the Red Sox are my favorite baseball team. I jumped on the Red Sox bandwagon in 1975. The 1975 Jim Rice, Fred Lynn. I jumped on the bandwagon.
Awesome.
And became a Red Sox fan, and then after that, I ended up going to college in Boston, and I lived in Boston for several years. So I was actually a Red Sox seasons ticket holder. The last 3 years, I lived in Boston.
Cool. Wow.
Sci-fi series.
Football, you got a squad?
Is so small in person compared to what it is on TV.
It really is. What a great park.
Yeah, I've seen it.
All right, so now everybody can go watch some NFL football.
Yeah, tie game right now.
That's the plan. Yep.
Sorry, Larry, my dog's plugging out. I'm getting my dog cleaned up. That's why I'm being rude, and I didn't mean to be on screen. Yeah, it's been a blast to talk to you, Larry. I really appreciate everything you brought to the table, man. I've already looked at the book. It looks awesome. I think anyone who's listening tonight and far beyond, that's the power of unity, right? We're all on this together. Hey, I'm going to share it on my Facebook, and we'll see what happens. Spread the word, right?
I'm going to do that also.
Yep. I've got a Facebook page for it.
There you go. It's all about networking now, Larry. With technology now, man. Facebook is a free vehicle to drive it to wherever you want to go. Spread the word.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks again for having me. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, Larry, you're more than welcome to come on anytime, and I'll talk to you on LinkedIn. I'll send you a link tonight to the show from my YouTube page. So I'll send it over there in case you want to share it out or whatever. But I'll definitely do that once the show is over. I'm actually off work tomorrow, so I'll be able to send it to you either tonight or tomorrow morning. I'll send it over to you.
Okay, great.
Thank you again, sir, for your time. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
So long. Yeah, all right.
That's right up my alley, man. Sorry to hoot and holler, but man, I'm like Tier Mr. Fantasy. I love it. I thought you have an LPGA today. I never know. I'm always optimistically curious whenever I log in, but that was a pleasant surprise.
Yes.
He's
a guru.
She's next week. She's on next week.
It's the old I don't want to ask 80 questions, but I'm I got questions at the holster ready to pull the trigger whenever a guy like that's on. I'm like, wow, I love picking that guy's brain. He's a guru. Fantasy's still thriving. It's a huge market for a lot of people.
No, I mean that's why we bring guys on, and I open the floor to you guys. I know sometimes in previous podcasts, if you're like the second or third person to ask, sometimes the questions you want to ask, the person in front of you will ask. So I always like to ask one or two, and I'll say, okay, you guys, if something I didn't ask, like Adam asked him, about strategy and all that stuff. I don't play fantasy sports, so that wouldn't be a question that I would go to. But again, I love our guests. I don't think other than one that I can remember, they've all been great. I mean, really. I mean, they come on here. They he asked me originally, how long can I be on? I'm like, you can be on as long as you damn well want. I mean, I'm not telling you to get off in 15 minutes. So,
and you gotta love people like that, because it's all in this world needs more love. Not to sound sappy, but it's true. You don't want someone, I got 5 minutes. Well, buzz off, hit the road. No, that guy's genuine, and he'll listen to our questions. He'll answer stuff. I mean, that was a great interview. And that guy could go talk to the commissioner of baseball about baseball. That's a very good guest. So, hey, win-win, A+.
That's LinkedIn for you.
That's
right.
That's how you do it, man. That's how you do it. And you don't hear yes or no unless you ask. And you got a yes, and that guy just nailed the home run. Good on you, man.
It takes when I started this, Adam can tell you when we first started. I first started. To get guests on, you're going to get 9 no's before you get a yes, and you got to keep asking and keep asking, and sooner or later you're going to get a bunch of yeses. It's just a coincidence that we had on last week, we had Larry on this week, and we have Nicole next week. So, I mean, we've got 3 in a row that we're doing. It's been a long time since we had them, and I mean, we've had great ones. We've had Jim Branstenter on here. That was a great show.
Yeah.
That was Adam's show.
Man.
Great show.
But that one together,
man. Adam's a home run hitter. Adam's a stone cold killer. I know that.
And guys, it's not just me. If you have somebody you want to bring on here, just let me know.
Mafia. I've got some across within college.
Yeah.
Small time school, but he's one of my teammates at OWU, small time college in Ohio. Now he's one of McDermott's main guys. He's the head of scouting for the Bills. And Lou, you remember that he was on the old show, How I Met Lou. I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. I joined someone else's podcast in Little Connecticut, and Lou would always call in, and I was like, "Man, this guy Lou is awesome." And things didn't work out with my thing, And I never lost Lou's side. I never left his side. And then he brought me to you, Brad, and I'm grateful for you and Adam. It's all connected, man. If you have love and you have ideas, Lou, I told you back in the day, like when I was first starting, all I would do, Adam, dude, like 1 a.m. I'm copy and pasting because I'm a recruiter during the day. So I'll copy and paste like, hello, it's Alex. I hope everything's well. How's the weather there? Like, listen, we want to talk.
Yeah.
I'm used to it every day. That's all I do. I try to talk to as many people. Talk about annoying. That's the anatomy of Alex, right? I'm a chatter times 20. So when you put me on a sports show and you ask me to go get guests, I'll go talk to Wayne Gretzky. He's equal to Janet Jones, the janitor down the road. It's all the same. I'll just scatterbrain. But Lou, I told you, I used to email people left and right. We got like John Starks, New York Knicks guard. I would just email. I would copy and paste on Facebook. Hey, we'd love for you to get on the show for 5 minutes. Just you never tell them an hour. Just tell them 5 minutes. If someone has a great story and they're a nice person like that guy, they're going to come on. No, we're all human. We don't have to be scared of an athlete. We're all human together. They'll come on the show. Brad, you can get a couple. You can get a couple Buccaneers or Rays. I'll help. I'm telling you, man. They're all human. They'll come on the show.
I always set the line at 15. Because for anything less than anything less than 15, it's kind of a waste of both of our time. So I like to set the bar at 15. Ask for 15,
good call.
And then at least 50. I always, whenever I'm approaching a potential guest, and most of the time I'm cold calling. I'm like, hey, I had this little podcast. We're a small time. If you have 15 minutes on a Thursday, let's and you'd be interested in coming on, message me back. And I shot Jim Bernstein a message figuring I'd never hear anything back. And I don't know, about an hour later he messaged me back, yeah, that'd be great, I'd love to come on. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And so we brought him on and we got to the 15-minute mark, and he's just going telling stories about growing up in Flint and how his dad and his brother both went to MSU, and so it was just that was a fun interview. He ended up staying on for 45 minutes, and I could have talked to him for 45 hours. So
you're right, Adam. I think I always say 5 because I'm scared. People love to talk about themselves, and if they might have like a charity or like they're running camps, or if they're just retired, and like a lot of these guys are millionaires, dude. They'll probably have a couple drinks. They'll be like, yeah, Brad or Alex or Lou or Adam, I'll come on your show for 10 minutes. They're watching Thursday Night Football. They'll come and talk about their college, their glory days. It's not like going to jail. Like people are excited to like come on a podcast. So no, it is. It's like an honor. You don't know until you ask. Like I mean, give me a list, man. Lou, I've told you that before, man. I mean, it's fun. We've all these athletes, they're all humans. All these writers, they're all humans. Brad's a writer now too. He's still the same Brad. Like it doesn't separate anyone. That guy loved being on the show. So I mean, we can approach books. We can approach
if you get him out of his air conditioned press box, he turns into a bit of a diva.
Hey, I sit in the stands for
turning the water Franco.
Softball, no air conditioning. I don't want to hear that crap. I don't want to hear that crap.
He used to be a VP. He used to be a rookie.
Yeah. He's complaining about being in the stands in South Florida in December. Oh, it's not fair.
Honestly, one of the cool things about sitting in the stands is you get to meet parents and you get to hear their stories of how their kids played baseball and how they got to USF and how they were recruited. So
everyone's got a story.
Yeah,
it's about being in the stands.
That was the bowl game you went to, and then you were mad because you couldn't plug your laptop in. That's what that was. That was that story.
That was in Orlando. Yeah, that was in Orlando. Yeah, that was shitty.
Keep going. That was a bit of the story.
That was the Cure Bowl. That was the first year I covered the Cure Bowl in Orlando.
Yeah. He was having a bad week, and that was that. There was a time when he was having connection issues, and he got on here, and he started going on about how it wasn't fair that he didn't get to be in the press box and he couldn't, and it was hot, and so I took a shot at him, and it was just me being me. We've had banter before, and I've busted his balls, he bust my balls, and I took a shot at him because it was December in South Florida, and so it wasn't like it was going to be 20. It wasn't like he was up in Ann Arbor and it was going to be 25 degrees, and he's like, "Oh, screw you guys, I'm going home." And he logged out, and I don't remember.
I remember that show.
I don't remember.
That's it. I'm out of here. Goodbye. Yeah. So, yeah. I went on Adam. Actually, he called me on the phone immediately. We got off the air. Called me. He's like, "Dude, I didn't mean." I'm like, "It's okay, man. I've had a bad week. It's not anything you did. I'm just not in the mood." Right. And I at the time. And guys, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, I've had bad nights, and I've come on here and been in a bad mood, and I can tell you within the 2-hour period, I feel better. Like, I feel better. There's a lot of times where somebody will say something to me, and I'll laugh, and I'm like, okay, I can forget about what the heck is going on out there and just think about what is happening here for the 2 hours.
Therapy. It's therapy.
Guys. So there have been
makes us, I was gonna simply say, like, this makes us big kids again. That's why I love fantasy too. Like, I got surgery coming up.
Right.
I don't know where I'm gonna live. I don't know where I'm gonna live soon. But you know what? There's almost guys down the street that don't get to have a podcast. So, like, I got something going for me, and this is our release. It's our chance to be fun and have friends and be cool. And it means the world to me. That's why I'm always so passionate. Like, a guy like that, I just love to ask him questions because I want to show love. And that guy's a knowledge bank. And, it's just fun, man. I'm grateful to be back on the show either way. You were talking about one bad night, Brad. Yeah, I don't need to remind myself of my one bad night. No, never again. You live, you learn. And you get better every day. And I'm a better person than I was that time and yesterday.
Over the team, whatever they want to call it, it's fine. It's no big deal.
Lives and learns. Don't call me Alanis Morissette. Call me Alex Morissette. Live and learn. You learn. Okay, I'm done. That's why I was a drummer. I'm a terrible fan.
You guys.
Yeah, I couldn't do karaoke. They bounced me when I started to do karaoke. I'm terrible.
you guys have helped me through a tough time. I mean, you guys were there when my mom passed away a few years ago, and Lou's mom coming on the very first show we had. His mom coming on and saying sorry for my loss was like, I wasn't prepared for that at all. I'll be honest with you. I mean, it took every ounce of will for me not to break down and right there when she did that, Lou. So I appreciate that, her coming on here. And I know Lou you lost your dad recently, right? Is that what happened, Lou?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, but yeah, I mean, you guys have helped me get through some dark days recently, and that's, like I said, I mean, I love having guys on like Larry and we have Nicole coming back. That was my last interview in my old place before I moved here, so that's going to be cool to have her back on, and she made it all through the LPGA. That's awesome to have an LPGA Tour player on the show.
Heck yeah, man.
I watched an interview today. Lexi Thompson, who's one of the famous LPGA, she's stepping away from a full-time schedule. So she's 29 years old. I mean, she's not, old or anything. She's 29 and she's stepping away because she's been doing golf since she was 6. So it's time for her to go and say, okay, there's other things in my life that I want to do. Maybe she wants a family. Maybe she wants to do something else. Yeah. And she has the money to do that. She has the money to step away and go, you know what? Right. I can tee up whenever I want to. So that's cool. But yeah,
have a real life,
right? Exactly.
It's just awesome, guys. It's awesome, and there's so much momentum. Brad, you're doing great things. You're doing great things to the Rays and USF. We're hustling over here. You give me a second chance. You don't think I'm going to be twice as hard working for you too. It's all going to pay off. Adam's on point. Lou's got a great show. Like we're all bringing energy. There's no limit to who we can bring into the show. That's all I wanted to say.
No, I mean, it would be great to bring on a current player. I don't care what NBA, NHL, NFL. I don't care. It don't matter to me. If they could come on here and if they can only talk for 15 minutes, great. If we have to donate to their charity, okay, we can make that happen too. So, you know, we did that. If you guys remember that general manager we had on, right? We donated money. We donated money to his team. And before the banquet that we had our show thing at, he quit. He quit being GM. So I'm like, oh, that's nice. So we donated to your charity, and then you quit and you leave. Like, oh, okay, well,
show your money.
Yeah. I brought
the money we have, you know.
I think it's tough. I think it's tougher with real quick. I think it's tougher with current pro athletes because now there's like 85 different like PR. Like there's some Megan, like 21-year-old with a skirt on, going, "Oh, you got to go through the team." So like, but if we catch like a 45-year-old, like a former Eagle, or a former Yankee, or a former Detroit Tiger, or a Michigan Wolverine who was an All-American, those guys, and they'll answer personally on Facebook at 11 p.m. on a Sunday night. You can book two of those guys. They want to talk. They miss being on ESPN. What's their next choice? Oh wow, I can go on Sports Report. They're easy to get, man. Those guys want to talk and relive the good old days. I would too. I mean, everyone loves a good sports talk show. I mean, those are the fish in the sea we should be targeting. The former players who are like, you know, everyone.
Sorry, Alex,
I'm talking to like,
No, you're good. I didn't mean to cut you off. That's my biggest complaint about Alex, is he will talk over people, and that drives me crazy. So that's the only thing you need to work on is letting people finish. I understand the ADHD and wanting to get in and not wanting to lose your train of thought. That's the only thing that's my only complaint is you talk over people. Other than that, you're great. And then I'm not calling you out or anything. It's not a personal attack. It's something that's been on my mind.
That was you last week, but that's fine. We all have mistakes. So yeah, I'll learn to temper if I'm passionate about something, I'm trying to get my point in. I love you the same. But yeah, it would be better, I think, for all of us, Adam. That wasn't a shot. That was me saying like I'm guilty. It would probably be better like when we have an interview format for like the next guest to literally have a roundtable and we can all prepare questions that they have. Because Adam, I do talk too much. I know that. But you're trying to help me. And I try to defend myself. It was weak. I know. I need to change that, but like we have so much knowledge and like passion.
It's not that you're.
I had a million questions and no one else was asking, so I'm going to step up.
No, absolutely, that's totally fine. It's totally fine. I'm not saying that what you're doing. What my criticism is that, and it's not a personal. It's something that I've noticed in a lot of podcasts. What happen is people will talk over each other, and so it's just, and that's something that you do a lot, and it's something that I wanted to bring to your attention while we're here now, so that as the show goes on, you can hear that and see that and understand. Oh, I'm talking. I'm letting the other person finish their thought. That's the only thing that I was saying. To go back to what Brad was saying about the GM guy we had on. Turns out he's a total dick, and I'm sorry about that. That's on me.
No, it wasn't your fault, but I mean, it's okay. I mean, he contacted me after we set that all up for us to donate to that banquet, and then he decided to quit. So it's okay. It's not your fault. You didn't know that. I didn't know. And it's okay. I mean, it's a lesson learned, right?
Yeah, definitely. It just turned out that he was a massive dick, and so
yeah.
So we had this guy. His name was James Ludwig, and I met him connected with him on Facebook, and he was in this GM. He was the GM of this league, this startup league for underprivileged post-college athletes.
Yeah.
And they were football players that didn't make the league and couldn't get signed to a practice squad or go to Canada. And so the whole idea was that they were going to start this league and it was going to be in the Midwest. It was, I think they called it the Great Lakes League or something like that. I don't remember. This was 3 or 4 years ago now. And he had messaged me, hey, about the league, and I told him about the podcast. I was like, and so then I hooked him up with Brad, and we had him on. It was like 20, 25 minutes. And it just turns out he's an insufferable pest. And I really haven't interacted with him. He had me on his podcast a couple years ago, and that show was a disaster and a half. He made me so mad.
Hey, live and learn, right?
So, yeah.
Nothing.
And
you realize something, then you back
I
out. But you and Adam, I love you. You give me constructive criticism. I keep you between the lines. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'll be better next week. If I'm not learning and living, I ain't living. So I take everything I write down. I got to work on that. I bring so much energy, but I got to pass the buck. I got to pass.
Temper that energy.
I get it.
Yeah, it was supposed to be. No, it was designed as constructive criticism because you were talking over Brad. You were talking over Brad, and I was trying to hear what Brad had to say, and then trying to hear what you had to say, and I couldn't hear either one of you because you were both talking at the same time. And so that's why I said something now. I'm trying to be constructive and not let it fester and turn into something where we all end up yelling at each other for no good reason.
Like the night that we had that we don't want to go talk about. Because that was should have been done off the air, and that that was not bad. But again, that's in the past. That's long forgotten and everything else. So
it
is what it is. So
no, I think as
far as you. Sorry, I'm right on top.
No, you're fine.
I was going to ask. With NFL now, do you have golf next week? Because I can maybe get the Bills scout in next week. If you don't need them, perfect. We'll go to that.
Yeah, she's coming on next week. So, and I don't know, guys, if I'll be on the 19th because if I get credentials, there's a Rays game that night against the Red Sox. So I'll let you guys know. You'll be the first to know if I get them. If not, there'll be a show. If not, then if you want to, Alex. How about the 26th? How about September 26th? Throw that out there. If not, we can do the first week in October, and then I'll be on vacation the following week. But if you want to do that too, that's fine too. I mean, there have been times that the last guy that I had on here prior to Chuck, I had to interview him by myself because he couldn't come on during our time. So I interviewed him, and then I played the interview. Do I like to do that? Yeah, it's great to have a one-on-one, but I like to have it with you guys because there's something that I'll say or he'll say, and then you guys can ask questions off of something I didn't even think of. Like Adam with the, asking him about fantasy, how do people that are not in the game get better and how the people that have been playing continue to stay better. I never would have thought of that because like I said, I don't play fantasy sports. So that wouldn't have been a question that would have come from me, but I'm happy he asked. So I'm happy he asked that question.
And I'm happy to let. I was just going to say what I was going to say is that I'm happy to let I was happy to let Alex lead on that one because I didn't have a lot of questions, and Brad had hit kind of my questions. I was late; it was a mess. I got stuck in the bathroom before the show started. And I'm like, ah!
And then Adam knocked his drumsticks over. He comes in and bam, they hit the floor. And I'm like, oh boy,
what's in the Matrix?
Day.
It was cans. I knocked cans off the table here.
I was quiet because I was the late guy and I'm the fourth wheel on the bus. I'm not stupid. I'm like the the stepchild coming in the Beatles. I know I have to earn my spot. I'm not trying to be a star, but that's why I was writing in chat. Like I have a lot to add. Like fantasy, I could talk. I knew what to ask the guy.
Yeah.
So that's why I was
Yeah.
trying to kind of like, hey, I can take the wheel if we need it for an hour. That's all I was trying to do.
No, you're good. The kind of the problem about coming in in the middle of an interview is that you've missed the first part of the interview. So some of the stuff was questions that he had already answered. So that was the only thing. But that's not on you. That's just a nature of the beast kind of thing.
Guys, I just friend request.
Of course.
Confirm it.
I did want to go back and. I wanted to go back to last.
I'm posting this book now.
I did want to go back to last week and kind of because we were talking to Chuck and it got a little cantankerous there at one point. Now, I didn't mean for it to get cantankerous, but I feel like he wasn't understanding what I was trying to express, and so. On the ticket sales are not down. Ticket sales are steady. No team stole the worst team in the league last year. I forget ticket sales was Chicago, and they averaged 61,000 per game, and Carolina averaged 71,000, and they if you think that's insane, you all want to guess who is number one?
I would expect the Bears to be sold out every week. That's a great, fun, proud fan base.
Number one, I would say, is the Dallas Cowboys.
Yes.
They're always sold out.
They are the most.
They're missing seats. That's the biggest stadium in pro football. 10 something.
You want
attendance.
You want to guess how much they average?
85%.
Higher than 95?
98%.
98?
They sold out 100%.
Wow. Holy cow. Okay.
There you go.
You know how many tickets
if they keep selling it, he will still be GM.
And they averaged 93,000 ticket sales per game last year.
Wow.
Well, I think
Lou, you're a Cowboys fan.
What he's okay. See, that's the thing too, and and I'm not going to make age here a factor, but he comes from an old school mentality, and a lot of people. And I'm going to be honest with you, and I know my boss watches my podcast, but people from certain generations don't want to evolve with technology. They don't want to do that. They're stuck in their ways.
Uh-huh.
And what he pointed out to me, but actually he a message through Facebook Messenger, Chuck did. And the example he showed me was the Chicago White Sox. And again, I understand why the White Sox have the lowest, because they're the worst team in Major League Baseball. They've been since the start of the season. But that's because ownership doesn't care. They don't care about the players. They don't care about the fans. If you have ownership, we all know, if you have great ownership,
not a bit.
Not the seats. If you have shitty ownership, there won't be anybody. Like me, I can say this about the Lightning. They sell out Amway Arena every night. The cheapest ticket you can buy now is like $95 to sit in the last row in the nosebleed section, because they sell out every night. And you know why?
Wow.
Because he cares about the fans. He cares about the team on the ice. If you don't give a shit, and will the White Sox get better if they get better ownership? No. Right? But that's what he was trying to say. I mean, he's right. It did get a little cancerous last week. And I'm sitting here like I see the 2-hour mark go by. I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to be getting off here. I don't know what I'm going to be getting.
That's on me.
I backed out of too. No, I agree. I agree with what Adam was saying. After a while, I didn't have to go anywhere. I'm like, I'm going to log off. I'm busy. So I felt like it was kind of going around in circles. So,
We were circling the
but
drain a
no,
little bit, yeah.
no, not the dream, Adam. You were keeping it great and simple. I felt like you were nailing the point and you were doing a great A+ job, and he didn't know what was going on. So I was just like, if I chimed in, I mean, I was just like, I had nothing else to say. So there's a fine line.
Yeah,
Talking too much. I mean, you went on last week, but you had to, and you made your point. I have to learn how to when I go on and on if it has a good point. So I know the fine line now. You told me like last week you were going a bit, but you had to prove it because he wasn't picking it up what you were putting down. I don't think he'll ever understand that. He's also saying, kneeling for the national anthem hurt the NFL. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a huge patriot. I love America. It didn't lose a dime overall. NFL's never been bigger. So he was kind of in that old school. You were educating him, and I was just like,
I was trying. Well, yeah, he tried to, he brought up the kneeling thing, and he tried to say that it hurt the NFL, and it for like all of 2 weeks, viewership was down, and then everybody got over it, and everybody came back, and he wanted to go to COVID. He wanted to make a big deal out of COVID, and it's like, but COVID is a once in a generational event. It's a black swan event. Revenue was down across the league because the fact of the matter was that they couldn't have fans. It's not that they didn't want to have fans, and it's not that fans didn't want to go. And there were external extenuating circumstances that kept fans from being at the games. And when you look at the rebound from 21 to 22 and 22 to 23 and 23 to 24, you see that the reason why the salary cap has gone bananas is because of the fact that the TV revenue has gone bananas because ESPN, and there's more media partners. The NFL has more media partners than just CBS, Fox, and ABC. Now they have Peacock and they have Amazon, and Peacock and Amazon are fighting for TV rights. And Goodell, love him or hate him, has been an ambassador for the game for the last 20 years, and he's earned every dime he's ever made for the league. His salary is whatever it is. You said something like $60 million a year or whatever it was. And the reason his salary is so big, the reason he has the house in the hills, is because the league revenue is $10 billion. And a lot of the old school fans, they don't understand that the salary cap isn't based on ticket sales. It's not based on personal revenue. It's based on league revenue. It's what the league generated. It's a percentage of the league revenue, and each team has just the same salary cap. It doesn't matter whether you're in Indianapolis, the smallest market, or in LA, the largest market. And the fact of the matter is that football is better now across the board, across the generations, than it's ever been. High school, college, pro, and the fact that there's only one real clear threat to win it all, and then you have 32 other teams that have to feel like if they get a couple of good bounces, they're going to be there in week 16, 17, 18.
Yes.
That there's so many unknown factors that New England, he was going, Chuck was talking about the defenses of at least a dozen teams that are considered in the bottom echelon of teams. And it's like, you're looking at, you're saying that the league was better back then, but you're also saying that teams are better now, that more teams are more competitive now. And that's what that the league top to bottom is more competitive, that there are more complete teams across the board, and that it's a market-based league. And if the market won't support a wide receiver at 60 million a year, then they're not going to get 60 million a year.
Nope.
But if that's what the market is, if that's what the market is supporting, if that's what the market is driving, if that's what is winning games and winning championships and keeping fans invested in the team year on year, that's what and fantasy football has going back to our guest today, fantasy football has really revolutionized how teams think about players and think about how to and think about how the game is played. Go ahead,
Well,
Alex.
not
Do you have
just
a question or comment?
but
Oh, we can't hear you, bud.
I hear you.
oh,
I was going to say sports gambling has changed everything. I mean,
Yeah.
I got a funny feeling, with what Larry was talking about with fantasy. I think between fantasy and betting on games, I think you're going to be able to do that from the stadium. They're going to draw you back by
yes.
doing that. So you're going to be able to play daily fantasy or nightly fantasy right there in the stadium, along with going, okay, Kansas City is a 10-point favorite. Okay, I'm going to take that. You're going to be able to bet at the stadium. I mean, here in Florida, we just got sports gambling legalized with Hard Rock. So before we couldn't gamble on sports. Now we can. So
It's going to happen. It's going to happen
Yeah.
that way. For your seat, it will happen.
And that's the other thing, is that the league is generating revenue in new and unique avenues with sports betting and fantasy football and even if your favorite, like Brad's team, the Patriots there, and how they're not expected to do well. If they have a fantasy star, it'll keep people invested.
Yeah, you'll watch game just because of the fantasy star. You're 100% correct. Yeah.
And the fact is that people just crave NFL football. Elliot, you might have to drop and come, and we'll bring you back up. So go ahead and drop and come back. There you go. No, and so what my overall point was is that it's not a ticket driven league. It doesn't matter if the fans are in the stands. Does it look better on TV? Sure, but NASCAR has had dwindling at race attendance, but their viewership has stayed pretty steady for the last 10 years. And that's where the real money in sports is made, is TV. And football is a TV sport.
But can I ask you a question about NASCAR?
Of course. You can ask me a question about anything you want.
My question, but about NASCAR is NASCAR has always been obviously ad revenue, right? Because that's what they want. They want to stick the ads, the teams, the companies, whatever on the side of those cars, because obviously that draws eyeballs to your car. And I don't care which driver you are, you're always trying to do that. Is there, because again, buddy, you're more of a NASCAR fan than I am. Is that starting to become an issue now with companies wanting to put their logo on a car, or can NASCAR overcome that if that is an issue? That's my question. I wanted to ask you a couple weeks ago about that.
It's like my meeting before. Can you hold on 10 minutes?
We can hear you again.
Hey guys.
To answer your question, well, the easiest way to make $1 million in racing, right? Start with 10. That's the days of a 200-mile-an-hour billboard. When you have the thing that made NASCAR such a consumer friendly sport, and that was when NASCAR was at its peak, is when now when the consumer brands were in the sport, Budweiser, Miller Lite,
DuPont.
Crown Royal, Tide,
DuPont.
Yeah.
DuPont. Well, DuPont's still in the sport. They actually changed
Who was senior
DuPont rebrand GM Goodwrench.
Right, okay.
DuPont changed they rebranded when they got bought out, and they're Altera now? Something right. And they still sponsor the 24 every now and again. But the thing about, and I think motorsports in general it's just so hard to be competitive in motorsports because as much as they don't want to admit it, and as much as they've tried to fight it for the last 30 years, the teams that win are the teams with the most money. The teams that can invest in the best specialists, the best pit crews, the best over the road guys or on the road guys, the best crew chiefs, the best car chiefs, the best car techs. You can put all the limits on it you want. You can take all the guys away that you want. You can put limits on it, but at the end of the day, motorsports comes down to money and who has the most money and who can generate the most revenue. And unlike football, baseball, unlike your stick and ball sports where it's a game, auto racing, and this is true across all motorsports, is that it comes down to who has the best financials. Like going back to what we were talking about with the NFL, it doesn't matter if Mark Davis has $1 billion and Jerry Jones has $100 billion. They each have the same amount of funds to work with at the end of the day, and they have to construct a roster and based on the funds the league gives them. Whereas in motorsports, the league doesn't have a salary cap. The league doesn't. Each individual team has to generate their own revenue, and then try to build the best race car that they can on any given Sunday.
They can build
that's what. And so whoever can build the better race cars will dominate on Sunday. Whoever can field the better team, the best pit crew, the best. Go ahead. You have a question?
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Yeah, Adam, I was going to chime in. Like, I'm absolutely amazed. I've always been a novice. Like, I didn't know that about NASCAR. There's no cap. So, like,
that's true.
They get a billionaire tune in and just build the best car. Wow. I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
It's not just the best car; it's the best team. So, like,
Driver,
the Pitbull,
team,
Michael
crew.
Jordan. Okay. So let's take. If you want to understand this, it's a total team effort. Pitbull comes in a couple of years ago, and they have a Trackhouse team, and they get the people that they think are going to work together and work well, and they have some success. Michael Jordan comes in the next year, and he starts his team, and he brings more money so he can hire better people. Not to say that the people at Trackhouse are bad people or bad, they're bad engineers. They don't understand what they're doing. They're very clearly one of the 38 smartest or 100 smartest guys in the garage area on any given Sunday. But Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin invested in better people and were able, and their driver won the regular season championship last week by 1 point over the best driver in the world. I mean, it's a total team effort. It's a total season effort. And then now, as we go along, as we get in, we're going into the playoffs, 10 races to decide it all in an elimination format. It's going to take a total team effort for the next 10 weeks. You got to lock in and be locked in for the next 10 weeks, or you're going home after 3 rounds.
Yeah.
That's it.
And football, whereas and what I was trying to express to Chuck and and people that think like him, and I was getting frustrated, and I do apologize. And I apologize for keeping you late last week. I thought we had extra time last week. I didn't realize this week. Is that football is a different, because of the hard cap. The NFL has a hard cap. You can't go over that cap. And so even though Jerry Jones might be worth $100 million or $100 billion, and you got the Walmart money in Denver now, that doesn't affect their ability to pay. What the way that the salary cap is set is based upon league revenue. So you have guys like Mark Davis, who is independently wealthy. He's not. The Raiders don't have to make him money. He generates a ton. I ran the numbers on the Panthers last week after the show, so I can come back and delineate these numbers based on their average tickets. Based on the average ticket, and I told Alex about this. We were talking a little bit.
That's a great breakdown by Adam. He nailed it. Go for it, Adam.
So they sold on average 71,000 tickets. They generated in excess of what was it? Yeah, $8 million, $7 million. It was $9 million per game. So and just ticket sales. That doesn't include concessions, parking lot fees, merchandise. That was just tickets. They've generated $65 million. The Carolina Panthers, a what some might call a poverty franchise, made $65 million in ticket sales, and that's all. That's money that the team keeps. And then they pay and then they pay coaching salary and staff salary. The player salary is not tied to that revenue. It's tied to the league revenue. So the 32 teams in the league.
I agree with you.
The 32 teams in the league. That's why I was trying to say it doesn't really matter if it goes to $4 million in 2027. If the market will support it, that's what I was trying to say, is that it's a market-based economy. And he was going on about how these young guys, they only play 3 years and then they want a new contract. I'm like, yeah, bud, because 40 years ago in the 80s, they couldn't do that because there was no hard cap. There was no negotiating. The PA was a weak entity. The union was a weak entity. And I was thinking about it. I was thinking, when he was growing up in the 70s and 80s, I'm sure there were guys in their 60s that complained about how the league was soft. I know there were guys that complained about how the league was soft and it was better in the 40s when real men played football and played both ways and all that. You got Namby, Whamby, Pamby, Sissy.
Every decade they're like, oh, back then those guys were not shit. Like it's always like a soft game of like softball. It's pathetic. They always want to compare themselves to each other. They should look after each other. The fact is, like you said, man, I mean, you nailed it last week. The NFL is a machine, and they didn't take care of their veterans and their players. But I mean, let's look at it. For instance, Jamar Chase, right? Stud, LSU. LSU wide receiver, best friend of Joe Burrow, Cincinnati. He's holding out. What's he holding out for? He wants one more penny than Justin Jefferson, star wideout on the Vikings. What does that mean? I mean, it's ridiculous. They're playing like petty games. I don't agree with it, but like, pay those guys. Those guys make billions for Goodell and the fantasy teams and everything. Everyone's making billions. Just pay the guy, suit up Sunday. We'll see you later. I mean, it's all machine. It's all machine. Don't get in the way of the machine.
And that was my point, is that the market, every position has made gains in their market share over the last 10 or 15 years, except for running backs, because running back is the hardest position in football. It's the physically hardest position in football because of the wear and tear on the body. And the fact is that most players don't make a second contract. They get one contract. They play 3 to 5 years and they're done. And that's all the football they play.
Yeah.
That's all the football they play is 3 to 5 years, and then for the next 50 years they have to figure out what they're going to do with the rest of their lives. And if you can make another $20 million, that's $20 million less that you got to find.
Yeah.
And you know, like if the other thing is like you complain, but you're not tuning out. You're gonna watch every Sunday. You're gonna watch every Bucks game. You're gonna tune into every game you can find. You're gonna watch.
He's watching everything.
I'm sure he's got the Ravens game on right now. He's watching that game because it's what he does, and we all do it. And
we do it too.
My contention is that you can't be mad at the employees for wanting more money. Like we all have jobs. We all work Monday through Friday. And if we had better representation and we could get a bigger cut of the pie, we'd all take another bite. We all want more from our.
Oh, dude. If I were Christian McCaffrey or Jamar Chase, I'd be demanding more money right now. They're making billions off my ass, my ability to score touchdowns, also my propensity, my vulnerability to get my spine broke, my neck broke. It's a dangerous sport. You're damn right. There's people in Brazil now watching the game tomorrow night. Eagles, Packers. Are you kidding me? It is everywhere. China. The NFL is making billions. You're damn right. I'm gonna ask for more money every year I'm in the league, and shoot me later. Because if you want me, you're gonna pay me. I mean, come on, man. You cannot blame the players.
No.
Violent sport in the world.
And that
Get
was
your money
that's exactly that's what I've been saying for years. Is that these guys, they go out there, they lay it on the line, and we expect them to lay it all on the line every week. We expect them to gut it out when they're hurt. They got the flu. They got busted shoulder. That they're sick. They're injured, and we expect them to perform at 100% every week. And then we have we're so self-righteous. And then we're so smug and self-righteous about it. Like, I just don't understand.
Yes.
Like, and
hypocrisy. That's what it is.
I wouldn't say it's hypocrisy. I'd say it's just it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how the union represents the player and how the agent represents the player and how the agent advocate for their players, and that if an agent thinks he can get you another dollar on another team, that and the thing is that players have agency now. Back in the 80s, they really didn't have that. I remember hearing the story about Joe Namath.
They were married to a team. If you got drafted, you're playing there for 12 years if you're lucky. If you went to the Green Bay Packers, you would never leave. Back in the day,
because the opportunity to leave just wasn't there because of the way the league was structured. That's why they advocated for free agency, a salary cap, parity, so that it wasn't the Niners every year, the Cowboys every year, so they couldn't just buy, so that the most financially solvent owners couldn't just buy a championship every other year.
No.
Yep.
And because in the 80s you had the Niners, and then you had 1 year of Chicago, and 2 years of really 1 year of New York. You had they win in a couple years of the Skins, and that was it.
Phil Simms, LT. You had the glory years, but yeah, then that was moving into Cowboys, Niners. You had Elway. There's been a landscape right there. It's a beautiful thing. If you're Picasso, paint it. No, it's a beautiful thing. The NFL landscape is the most money-rich pro sport anywhere in the world. You have guys in Brazil tomorrow watching the Eagles. I have to log into it to watch them. I mean, come on. They're on Peacock. I mean, come on, man. It's a money making machine, brother.
After Premier League Soccer, there's the NFL is the richest sport in the world. It generates an astounding amount of money.
I could be wrong, but I feel that way. I mean, and I love Brad. I love your guest before. Like he nailed it. That's a huge component. You have dads that have like 13-year-old daughters. They're drafting Travis Kelce. Why? Because they're a Taylor Swift fan. I'm telling you, you have people coming in. You have hundreds of thousands of people coming into fantasy that would never watch football that are watching NFL. It's a brilliant marketing move. Think about it. You're bringing in crowds.
Oh, well,
You can't deny it. It's a great marketing move.
well, you make a great point about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and the Taylor Swift fan base that's been brought into the league. And that's why they push so hard on this Taylor Swift thing, is because people that weren't interested in football, would never have been interested in football, are now curious about this whole football thing because they're Swifties. And this is it's not a gender thing. It's a phenomenon thing. It's not just little girls. It's not just little girls. It's like you have boyfriends and dads that are able to go, well, Taylor Swift's going to be there. And then you get the little girl to watch, this football thing's pretty all right.
Yeah.
So
now they're buying jerseys, and the whole money, the whole league is being fueled by all these different things. And DraftKings and gambling and fantasy, Goodell is making billions. It's the best league in the world. I said that last week for all those reasons. They have the most money-making channels going through their ass up to the economy. I mean, that's the best industry for sports teams. That's the best pro sports league in the world. It is. So Goodell's laughing. I don't agree
all
with
the way
that.
to the bank.
He's not. Hell yeah. It is what it is, man.
And that's the thing, is that when it comes to generating revenue, that's the owners what the owners want. And that's why, fans don't like Goodell, but it doesn't matter if you don't like him. You can don't like him all the way. You can hate him all the way to hell. You can hate him all the way to hell. But
if you don't show up, it doesn't hit his bank account. He doesn't care.
And it does.
If you don't show up,
and the thing. And then going back to talking about the White Sox and something I wanted to elucidate a little bit on baseball is baseball doesn't have a hard cap. I mean, baseball doesn't have any kind of cap, and so the baseball is really driven by the coast. It's New York and LA, and if those two teams are doing well, they can weather a bad White Sox team. Because it doesn't matter, because people are going to tune in to see what the Yankees and the Dodgers are going to do, and so and it's really all about TV ratings, and if they can, and if the NFL thinks that when the next cap increase comes up next year. And it does another 20 or 30 million. It's because the league generated that much extra revenue across the 31 teams or 32 teams. So it's all tied to what the league is producing, what kind of revenue the league is producing, and that's why they don't really care if there's only 14,000 fans at a particular Panthers game, is because the rest of them are tuning in on TV, and the blackout restrictions have really gone away over the last few years because fans were complaining that they couldn't watch their local game because it wasn't sold out, and there are very few blackout games anymore. And
Exactly.
And
that's why.
Adam, you nailed. Oh, sorry, Adam. Go for it, man.
No, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. You're
I
gonna
was
heap
going to
praise
say
on me and keep doing it.
that's why I felt like you nailed it last week. Like you were trying to differentiate. Buck was a great guy. I got it. Hey,
Oh yeah,
if he was walking that block, if he needed a ride or if he was talking to me about anything, I'd talk to that guy. I think he's cool. Nothing wrong with him.
yeah.
You didn't understand. The NFL is a different world now. The league is built on revenue from jersey sales. Back in the 80s, no one was buying boomer sized jerseys. Now, if you're in Cincinnati, Jamar Chase, they make $200 a pop. It's a different
Yeah.
world. And you throw on fantasy sports.
Well,
There's so much revenue right now. They're not worried about the kid and the dad who's not in the seats in a Cincinnati stadium to see the Bengals week 1. Do I agree with that? No. Do I know that's fact? Yes.
Yes.
well, it's because they don't. But what doesn't matter about that dad and kid that aren't in the stands is because that dad and kid are at home watching the game. Because that
Watching it.
dad, because that dad bought the Peacock. He bought the Amazon. He's got the YouTube. He's got he's got the Sunday ticket.
Yeah.
Even though they may not spend $1,500 at a game, it doesn't matter because they bought the Hulu, they bought the YouTube, they bought the Netflix, they bought the Peacock, they bought the Amazon. They have Red Zone. They have Sunday ticket. They're gonna make they don't care how they make their money because the owners want fans in the stands because they can generate revenue from concession sales. The league at large doesn't care if 2,000 people don't, if they don't sell out those last 2,000 tickets or whatever. And
They don't.
based on the research I did last night after the show and preparing for this one,
Nice.
what I saw was I didn't see. I saw 61. The league minimum Chicago, they sold 61,000 seats, and if that's not capacity, that's damn near capacity.
Bears?
And those other 4,000, they sold 61,000 seats. Yeah, maybe they didn't have 61,000 people at the game, but it doesn't matter because they got their money. Like once that ticket's bought, if you don't show up,
Nothing
it
else
doesn't matter
matters.
because they at least got one. They at least got you once. If you don't show up, they got you once.
Yes.
They got you on the front side. They may not get you on the back side. They may not get all those concession sales. They may not get another $100 off you in concession sales and $100 or $200 in the pro shop and $40 in the parking lot. But they got you on the front side.
Adam, you know way too much about marketing. That's what the NFL is all about. Yeah, it's all been a game, but it's a great sport.
Econ 101.
I've had my heart broken multiple times. I'll keep rushing back to the counter. Tomorrow night, yeah, Eagles, whatever. No, we always come back. I'm loyal to the core. And it's a great product. So but Goodell's pushing different things. Market sell.
He doesn't idiot.
That's why I said, did you think I wanted to say to Buck or that everyone should worship NFL? I grew up on NBA, MLB, but I know what's good is good. I know NFL rocks everyone. That is the heavyweight. That's the Mike Tyson of every pro sport. And he was like, no, it is what it is. NFL is running circles on everyone. It's marketing. It's advertising. It's fantasy too. It's betting. NFL is running circles. That's it.
Well, there's a thing in econ. It's scarcity drives demand, and if you create it by the very nature of football, there is scarcity. There's a limited number of games every year. There's a limited number of games in your local market every year. I think it's 256 games in total.
Yes.
Not including preseason and postseason. But the regular season is 256 games. And everybody plays 17 games. 9 home, 9 away. It rotates every year until probably 2027. I think we'll go to a full 18 game schedule, and we'll have 2 off weeks, and we'll have 2 preseason games. I think that's how that's gonna end out before too long. But there's an artificial, or that's not necessarily artificial. There's an actual scarcity of NFL games, and it makes, because I remember when we had been at 16 for about a decade, and when I first started getting into football, when they went from 14 to 16, and people said, "Oh, there's too many games and nobody's gonna watch," and going back is like when they went from 10 to 12, back to 10, back up to 12, and then they settled on 14, and they were at like 14 for 20 or 30 years before they expanded out to 16. There used to be 6 weeks of preseason, and then they decided to add 2 regular season games. They added 2 regular season games, and I think that was 1981. I want to say it was 81, 82, 83, somewhere in there. What's that?
Oh God,
78. Okay, I was close. They went to a full 14 game schedule, and I think it was 94 when they went to the 16 game schedule. Maybe it was earlier than that. It might have been the late 80s. And I remember growing up.
Sorry, Ad. Go for it.
No, what were you saying? I couldn't hear you. You were breaking up a little bit.
I tend to like throwing like bad jokes randomly. I was gonna say that's where Goodell became like a death camp where it was all about his money. Yeah. No, like it was a more realistic schedule. No, seriously, that's all I was gonna say. Fight the power.
No, it was Paul Tagliabue. Paul Tagliabue started this train. He got the train rolling. It was Tagliabue that when he took over for the guy before him, his name escapes me off the top of my head, but he was the one. He expanded to 16 games, and I remember growing up. I remember being a young kid and being around older NFL fans, guys in there that were at the time in their late 30s, early 40s, and 50s, and they were going on about how there was too many games and this was unsustainable and the league was going to go away, and how football was better when there was. Well, it was football was better when there were 14 games. They're going about how OJ set the record in 78 when there was only 14 games, and it's ridiculous now. And then and then what, 5, 6, 7 years ago now when they finally went to, I think that was 2018 when they finally went to 17 games, and there were fans in their 30s and 40s who I grew up with. They were going, "Oh, there's too much football and it's unsustainable and people are going to tune out and people aren't going to watch 17 games a year." And where are their answers?
I told you guys last week. I mean, if Goodell had his way, they would play 7 days a week. Look at the Eagles. Packers are playing in Brazil on a Friday night. Shoot me. The Eagles Packers are playing on Friday night. I mean, come on.
I don't know about every night of the week. I don't know if seven days a week is too much. You do run. There is diminishing returns at a certain point. There's a certain level where it goes from being because that was something that I used to say, that it was so you're gonna have burnout. You got games on Thursday, you got games on Sunday, you got games on Monday. You're gonna end up with burnout. And people are just going to kind of, they're not going to tune in for a full season. Well, this is where I turn into. This is where I have to turn my intellectual.
Yeah.
This is where I turn my intellectual honesty. This is where I turn my intellectual honesty card in and be like, all right, punch it. I was wrong. There are the viewership has not gone down. It has sustained. Because there was a time where the Thursday night games weren't popular, but then they moved over to Prime. They've rebounded. They stabilized. Those games to generate those games generate viewership. They generate ticket sales. Those games are popular. People do want football. They probably want football every night of the week. They probably want more football. I think I can't believe the NFL doesn't have 5 games on Sunday. 2 in the early window, 2 in the afternoon window, 2 in the and a nightcap.
Was that wrong? That's what I'm saying. He's pushing for Netflix. He's pushing for 7 days a week. Get out. Watch him. They're playing in Mexico tomorrow. I'm trying to wear an Eagles jersey. I feel like a jerk. I feel like, yeah, I'm wearing an Eagles jersey. They're playing in Mexico tomorrow night. God bless you. I mean, come on, man. Come on, man.
Well, there is such a thing as diminishing returns, and too much of a good thing is too much.
Feels like
And
my life.
so I don't know if we'll ever see. I don't know if we'll ever see a time where there are 7 days of football, pro football. I mean, because you have Sunday night, you have Thursday night NFL, Friday night is high school football, Saturday is all day college football, Sunday and Monday are NFL football, and so I don't know if they can compete. With I don't know if you could add a game. The problem with trying to add a game on Saturday is you got so many guys that are college football fans. There are a lot more college football fans that aren't NFL fans than there are NFL football fans that aren't college football fans. And I know that from both living where I live now in Southeast Tennessee, there are a lot of college football fans that don't care about the NFL. There are a lot of NFL fans that don't care about college football. And when I lived in South Alabama, there were lots of college football fans, but NFL fans were fewer and farther between. So you had a lot of LSU fans, a lot of Alabama fans, a lot of Auburn fans. You had Florida fans. You had Tennessee fans, but you didn't have a lot of Jacksonville Jaguars fans. You had the occasional Saints fan, but if they were a Saints fan, they were also a Tigers fan. And so Bradley, you're in South Florida, and I or mid Florida. I don't know if Tampa Bay is considered South Florida or not. But is that how you see it where you're at?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say Central Florida because Central Florida is Orlando. I'm in like the middle of Orlando, or South Florida is Miami, Fort Lauderdale, that type of area. Daytona
are you mid Florida?
East coast of the state, up in northern Florida. So yeah.
So being in mid Florida, do you feel like there's more college fans that are NFL fans, and NFL fans that are college fans? Is that how you is that your perception?
I would say there's more college fans because I have friends that think the NFL is fixed.
Right.
People think, and they like college football better. They don't watch pro ball anymore. And that's just that's how they feel. So yeah, but I would agree with you on that one. I think there are more college football fans in my area because you have 3 teams in the state that are big time teams: Gators, Noles, Hurricanes. And then you throw in USF, UCF, and then you throw in the little schools like FAU, FIU, FAMU, Bethune-Cookman, all of them in that category too. So, because I got to get off some stuff to do.
All righty, man.
So I will see you guys next Thursday for our Guess with Nicole. But I'll see you guys then, man. Peace.
All right, take it easy.
Adam, hit me up.
Yeah.
Saturday show.